Well, let's just dive right in here. It's a neat property. It's a diamond in the rough, right? This diamond has not been squeezed yet. When I manage any property, my own or someone else's, I always zoom out and look at the entire neighborhood and can look at where the best sources of food, cover, and water are. And unless I'm in South Texas or New Mexico or something like that, water is my least concern. It's my lowest priority because in most of the East, there's water everywhere. And of course, when we look at your map, there's pond on your place, there's pond on neighboring properties, there's some drains, I'm sure hold a little water in there. Water's just not a limiting resource unless there's a major drought. So water's a non-issue. So when we go back to food and cover in south, west, south, southeast of you is pretty open timber, it looks like, and really open cattle pasture, fescue pasture. But we come back to this northwest, and by next year, they're going to have awesome cover and pretty good quality native. There's so much land that even if there's just one sprig of quality food every 2 square feet, there's a lot of food out there. And I suspect more and more deer are going to start hanging in that area unless there's extreme hunting pressure pushing them around. And as it gets denser and denser, each year it grows up, it's going to be tougher to hunt, right? Because they have no visibility. They're probably putting a corn pile out in Georgia and watching that corn pile. So you need to, from my point of view, not the timber guy's point of view, you need to act quicker than later because you're getting ready to see a caribou type migration to this property that has much better habitat. You're a closed canopy forest. And when we look at some of the pictures you shared with us, you can see you're walking through, and it's just as far as I can see in the picture, it's pine straw. Yep. And all the lower limbs have shaded and self-pruned. It's a typical closed canopy pine forest. So when we go up here on your property, there's 11.3 acres of a pine hardwood. Do you happen to know, are those oaks or,
It's actually older pine trees, and I don't know what the DBH is on them, but they're big.
There's only a couple of good things from a pine tree as far as a deer's concerned. Of course, they don't eat them, and there's very little bedding, especially in a mature pine tree. Could be some shade on a really hot day, but there's not much there. So there may be a little bit more of a market for mature pine, but you're going to want to thin that or ideally make a food plot up there that is very flat, and you got this massive bedding area that just got whacked right next to you.
Yeah.
Let's get us a food plot up there and try to shortstop some deer crossing over to the cut over there. Looking at this map, I can clearly, unequivocally see the plantation pines, and there is a little row of hardwoods in there, but maybe by SMZ, a stream management zone or something, that little drain that goes through there. So I think what I'd like to do is right where because that whole neighboring property comes way down south on that western border, right before you get to that drain. It's pretty flat right in there. But right south of that drain, in the younger pines,
okay.
there's actually a little opening over on in there a little bit, but I'm going to include that eastern opening and kind of come down to there's almost another little drain. You can see some really small, you can see some little waves in the topo lines there.
Yeah.
And then back up northeast to that opening up there and put in about a 3-acre food plot right there. And I realize you may not get this done this year, but when this is going to be your plan. And that way we're further enough off both the west and the north sides. And it's going to make a great bottleneck between that drain and a bottleneck between the western border, because that's now a real line, right? If they had the same age pine trees to the deer, that wouldn't be a line, but that's a line because they clear cut the western side and you still have timber. So we can get a 3-acre food plot in there, and it's a little bit of a bottleneck between your pond and that food plot. So now you got all kind of stand locations in there, stand or blind, that you did not have without that food plot. Because now they're either going to the food plot or going around the food plot. And then we go on over to the east just a little bit, and there's a big flat area that's just production pine. I mean, I can see the rows clearly on my map. And it's a flat area in there, kind of between there and where they left another hardwood pine area. And there are some hardwoods in there. I can see by the canopy there's some hardwoods in there. We're going to make another food plot in there, and what that does is make another great bottleneck. I'm sure when you're on your property now, you kind of go, well, man, where do I put a stand or where do I put a blind? Because it's pretty homogeneous. So we're going to make another food plot, not only get some food on your property, you're going to win this battle with food.
Yeah.
The lease up there is not going to spend a lot of money on food plots, I don't believe, and probably doesn't have permission to make a lot of food plots. And if you have the best food in the neighborhood during hunting season, then I want you to think of your property almost like a Rubik's Cube. And if you go north for a mile, and northeast and east and southeast, all around there, guys, there's 8 miles around you. When we implement this plan, you're going to have the very best food in the neighborhood and get more deer. They're not going to live on your property, but they'll be crossing through your property. And to be spending a disproportionate amount of time on your property. So, and then again, like during the pre-rut, or the deer just don't want to come to food plots, I'm leaving these far enough apart to make a great travel corridor. So, I'm not seeing much browse in my food plot, great, just hunt between them, and you have a lot of browse. Then if you go over to your house place, man, it's just on this beautiful, big, nice, flat hill up there. I'm sure it's an awesome view, except you can't see anything for all the trees. What I propose doing is making a food plot. And we're just going to make about an 1.5 acre food plot on the crown of that hill.
Yeah, okay.
And then you have this awesome view where you can see critters, turkey and deer out there, whatever, right from your house. And have an outstanding view of the mountains, but the neighbors won't be able to see into you because of the slope. Let's go on north across the railroad tracks.
Yep.
And looks like there's maybe a little creek bottom down in there. You got a really cool situation there because you got a natural bottleneck. You got the hill or mountain your house is on. Then you got a big hill over there on your neighbors that kind of tapers down and stops on your land.
Yep.
And right in the west end of that pine stand we were just talking about, you need to terminate some of those pines because this is right in a natural bottleneck. It's a pretty one. Yeah. And get about a 3/4 acre food plot down in there. Now I'm going to tell you that's going to be a little tougher to hunt because the wind's going to swirl down in there. There's always you can't hunt it every day, but when you get a north or west wind, this is so awesome. You get a north or west wind, you can just go over to your west fence line, your west border, and cross the train tracks and go down in there and be on the east end of that. Or in the morning when the thermals are wanting to push, and just get the wind in your favor, and those deer will never know you're in the planet.
Yeah.
That's going to be it's a hidey-ho food plot. You're not going to feed a lot of deer there. You're going to harvest a lot of deer there.
Yeah.
And then let's venture on down here south of the road. I would not ignore that because you got cow pasture and pine plantations south of you, and if you can get some food in there, deer are going to. There's some pine south of you. If you can look at a satellite image that have been thinned, and I'm sure deer are bedding in there, but there's no food. So if you go right in the southwest corner, there's a nice little hilltop down there. And it's pines, and you're going to need to kill some more pines. That's the common theme to your plan is killing pine trees if you haven't picked that up yet. And I'm going to draw another just little hidey-ho food plot for you down there. And again, it's going to be an attraction. Deer coming off this big cattle farm, and you're going to have the best food in the neighborhood, and they'll probably get there still in daylight. And if there's a south wind, you can just drop off the road there and get right down in there, and all those deer to the south of you is never going to know you're in the world.
Yeah.
And so we're getting a little hidey old food plot down there, and I'm liking this plan. We get in a valley over there between there and the old chicken house, and the wind's it's a narrow valley, a little bit of a narrow place, and wind's probably going to swirl a little bit in there. And we get up there by the chicken house. And I would not be afraid to do this at all, but if you go on the east side of the old poultry house, it's still a little flat in there. And I would make another food plot. Your big feeding plots are obviously on the other side of the road where you got a little bit more flat land. So we've now have 6 food plots, 3 large ones for feeding and big turkey strut areas and whatnot, and 3 smaller ones. And we have all these pines and a few hardwoods around there. And the next secret is we're back to the continuum, because as I said, the most important thing you can do to your property is not really these food plots, but thin and pine. So you and your family at some point are going to have to decide and talk to a local forester and those local prices and say, well, if we thin this percent and we get down, and my hope for you would be, this is something you would write down, my hope for you would be you're thinning down to 60 basal feet per acre. And when you get down, and when they thin these, they're going to do what's called a 5th row thin. They're going to take out every tree on the 5th row and then selective cut for the 2 rows on either side of it. So, there's a row that's totally removed every 5 rows. And let's say you got that row and you're going to the right, and there'd be 2 where they just select cut. And if they're doing a good job, they're taking the crooked or multi-stem or something trees and leaving the best to continue making wood. So I'm going to draw some thinning, some places to thin on here.
Now, when you thin, are you going to run the rows a certain direction?
They're going to go the same direction they were planted in.
Okay.
Like when I zoom in close, I can tell exactly and this is a great thing I want to talk about, but most of that big section, the 50-acre section of planted pines, was planted north and south. Yeah. Which is great because the sun is going east and west. So if you've got north and south rows, you're only getting half-day sunshine, which is about perfect for a lot of plants. And on half-day sunshine, you're not drying out as much. You're not getting that really harsh, hot afternoon sun. Not only is the temperature hotter, but the soil temperature is higher, and it's easier for moisture to evaporate out of the soil. If you had east-west planted pines, they get all-day sun. And those crops would be much drier. The soil will not have near as much moisture because it's getting a full-day sun, so more water is evaporating out of the ground. Pines have a deep taproot. They don't utilize a lot of surface moisture. So you can grow a food plot under pines if there's sun getting down there pretty easy. Those are some of my favorite food plots. So in that 50-acre section, man, I'd be making, I'm not drawing any more big food plots, but on those, when those 5th rows get out in a year or two, those stumps rot, those young stumps rot really quickly. I would go in there with my implement, whether you're disking, I hope you're not, or no-till drilling or whatever, and plant food plots in those thinned 5th rows. And everyone goes, well, I can't see the deer because they're only 1 step away from cover, but it's just the opposite. The deer are so comfortable. They're right there at food, and one jumped in cover that they're spend all day there. They're just so comfortable. Yeah. So those thinned 5th rows, and we're going to highlight that, thinned 5th rows will end up being the best hunting on your property. There's no doubt in my mind. And that will let you get a whole lot more food on your property without knocking down trees or killing a bunch of trees to make a food plot. It's a real inexpensive way to get food plots on your property. And a deer and turkey are very, very comfortable because it's food cover, food cover, food cover. You'll be able to hold a whole lot more deer. On Mac's property here, we got these 3 feeding food plots. This is going to be great right on this hilltop here, and you can see it from his house. I have the same thing where I live. And when deer aren't coming to these feeding plots, we've got these great travel corridors in between, right? The base of this hill and right here and right here. there's a big hill here and one here, and the deer are gonna just go right through there, almost like gas through a funnel. Now it's gonna take a really specific wind to hunt this, or it's gonna swirl in there. And this is a ridge top, and this is a ridge top. So lots and lots of hunting opportunities. But the real magic to Mac's property, these pines, these are all pines here, are planted north and south. She's my favorite technique of thinning that fifth row. That's standard forestry. And then they do select harvest on either side to get more sun down in there. But plant that fifth row. So it's food cover, food cover, food cover. And you can pack a bunch of deer and turkey in that type of habitat.